So I'm gonna just start, I guess. And hello, Jay. Welcome to
Hi.
the Open MFA quarantine talk, I guess. And
Is that what we're calling it?
yeah, quarantine artist talk. And thanks for being here, and thanks to everyone else. And I guess you're gonna be talking about like what you've been working on as an artist and like what you've been researching recently. And you're like a little bit more than an artist. You're becoming like kind of a researcher and I don't know, just like a whole G kind of a person compared to like whenever I first like met you, which is really
Yeah,
cool.
you met me when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
I was also a Christian and we met in church, so that was very different.
yeah, we met in church. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm an artist. I'm an artist, but I have been using research for the purpose of my projects, and I'm also in college now at the moment doing some courses studying English. And with that, I've been researching. But yeah, I want to make something clear from the very beginning, which is that I'm very much against this idea that in order for a truth to be valid or an idea or a concept to be valid, it needs to be this heavily researched, cited thing. And I'm not very interested in this idea of academic scholarship as a means of being the only valid way of producing a concept or producing art or research. I think, of course, this is not to say that I'm against truth. Truth is life, and evidence supports truth, but it's not the the only means of truth. I will be citing some things. I have some references. I emailed those to you this morning so that you can share them. But yeah, I don't claim anything and I own nothing and property is an illusion and everything I'm doing is because I love it and I'm an artist and I love what I do. And so yeah, that's just wanted to get that out. But for the
yeah,
purpose of this talk, specifically talking about Variable Embrace, my project Variable Embrace, which looks into the phenomenon of younger people who are attracted to older people. And in my case, that being men attracted to men. So, I realized that I was attracted to older men when I was a teenager coming into my sexual awakening, whatever, my adolescence. And yeah, I've always been into these much older people. And so that is what Variable Embrace is about. But in the overall theme of sexuality, I'm asking all of these other kinds of questions too. And in the project, I have delved into this idea of sexual repression and how sexual repression is very prevalent within modern society. And that, of course, being a symptom or caused by religious imperialist colonizers, European colonizers in the early days. And yeah, and so all of that is what I've been thinking about these past few months. The project didn't necessarily start very research heavy. Variable Embrace didn't start with this heavy emphasis on research. It just began as a means of creating something as a catharsis, as a way of feeling okay and creating this beautiful image of something that's very underrepresented within culture, which is the relationships between younger and older people, which some call gerontophilia, some call intergenerational or age disparate. There are a bunch of titles for it. They're all very clinical and such. It's, you know, it is what it is. It's two people in a relationship together, or it's an attraction between two people. In another sense, I mean, is that a good intro? Is there anything you wanted to mention? I could just keep on going.
You might as well, yeah, keep on going. That was the intro, so just keep on going.
Okay. Yeah, an idea that I've had recently, and I've been prompted to dig into a bit more because of one of the classes I'm doing, one of the sociology classes that I'm taking now. They wanted us to write a theoretical research paper, and so because all of these ideas about sexuality are revolving around my brain right now, I had this one question that really stuck out, and that's the question of sexual violence within culture, within society. And it's not something that we can ignore. I hear so many stories in the news about femicides or violence against women. And then there's also just the history of anti-gay or anti-LGBT violence in the US, not only in the US, but across the world. And this stuff just doesn't end. It's a self-perpetuating machine, this violence. And I wanted to know whether this homophobia within modern culture was linked to this heightened violence against women because it's so prevalent. And so I began looking into that question, and yes, sure enough, it is related, and I think it's impossible to separate the two: femicide or violence against women and the presence of homophobia within culture. And homophobia can be all types of things. Homophobia can be an outward, violent, either physical or verbal violence. Homophobia can also be this type of unspoken, like I write in the paper, a soft serve tolerance. It's this allowing it to exist, but also there's this sense of doubt or this sense of lesser than, or a type of objectification of the homoism. And I say homo being just anything that falls outside of the hetero spectrum. And so that is what I began looking into. And there's some really fascinating stuff within that subject line. There's one book in particular that is very, very thorough, which my dear love introduced me to this book. Author James Neal put this book out in 2009. I don't know anything about this author, James Neal. He doesn't mention anything about him in the book, and I haven't really researched this person, but The Origins of Same-Sex Relations in Human Culture. It's an incredible book. Begins with, the opening chapter gives an overview of that is same-sex relationships within nature, within the animal kingdom, not just within humans. This is something that's been prevalent in nature forever. And then, moving into early humans, indigenous, Aboriginal people, and all of these early civilizations across the world, how they all have this presence of same-sex relationships that served a purpose within that culture. And at some point in the second part of the book, he pulls together all of this research in the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages seems to be, or the medieval period seems to be, where the tides began to turn, and how this idea of homosexuality being evil, being sodomy, right? How this term sodomy became synonymous for anal sex and for homoeroticism. It's still unclear how that came to be, but the Middle Ages seems to be where that happened, with this Catholic or Christian dogma that began to spread around the world by force through colonization and imperial control. And so as that happened in the Middle Ages and throughout early modern culture, this idea that homosexuality or same-sex relationships was a problem, that began to set itself within culture. And so today, within contemporary culture, this is still a thing. We still believe that, by and large, same-sex relationships are a problem. And yeah, and then there's another idea in the book that heterosexuality itself is a myth, that nobody is heterosexual. And this term comes up. The author didn't invent the term ambisexuality, but the term is used by him in the book and by some others. But ambisexuality being this idea that human sexuality is an ambiguous spectrum. And that's something that was also introduced by the Kinsey studies in the early 20th century, 1940s or 50s or something like that. So yeah, that's kind of a brief history of that, of this developing of homosexuality within culture. And that book does a really, really fantastic job of explaining that origin and that development over time. Yeah, I think this word tolerance is terrible. I was talking about this with a friend. He was interviewing me for the catalog text for the exhibition that is up right now at Photo Fest. And we were talking about this word tolerance and how it's so clinical, and it doesn't really make sense how tolerance is. It's just this letting something be without really embracing it or loving it. And I think, yeah,
Or not
we
loving
should
it.
we should get rid of the word tolerance when talking about human rights. It's not, we don't want to tolerate each other. We want to embrace and coexist, as
Yeah.
that cliche.
It's so weird that like we give like sexuality like a name or like a term, like you have to brand it. It kind of sucks because it's so open, you know.
It is, yeah, and it's become a binary. It's become the heteronormal and the homo other. Whereas, when I meet a seemingly straight person and we don't talk about sexuality, we just, engage in a conversation. And then at some point, maybe I'm mentioning a boyfriend or something like that. And then that person is like, "Oh, you're gay. I didn't know. I don't assume." Well, it's
Yeah.
like, well, you assumed I was heterosexual.
Yeah.
So you did assume.
Yeah. So can you start talking about your work that's at Sabine Street Studios now?
Yeah. So we have this exhibition at Sabine Street right now. Civic TV with Terry. Terry's here in the call now. Terry curated that. Terry runs Civic TV as a nomadic space. And it's 9 artists. The show is called 9. We have a great selection there. But I'm showing 10 prints from Variable Embrace. These are large scale. There's one right here. That's the love of my life portrait. And that's hanging there also. So there's 10 of those. And yeah, Variable Embrace is this project about, I would say it's about homosexuality right now. It's about masculinity, men who have sex with men. I don't know if it's always going to be that way. I do entertain the idea of at some point photographing female or other gendered people that are not male and showing those age dynamics too. I don't want it to just be like I think right now the project is very centered on this pale skin older man body, and then you have 2 images with my body and 1 image with a younger Asian guy. And so it is very centered on one type of body now. I don't want it to stay that way, but I've had to photograph what's been available or who has been available and the types of people that I've met along the way. And it's been, there are not too many people who are just ready to take their clothes off for portraits, go figure. And so Variable Embrace began, like I said, as this catharsis project, as a way of photographing this phenomenon within myself that I had observed and I had grown into in my adolescence and my sexual awakening, which was realizing that I was attracted to much older people. And for a while, I was tormented by that idea. I didn't like it. I didn't know what to do about it. And that resulted in all types of terrible things, depression, thoughts of suicide all the time. I grew up wanting to kill myself from the age of like 13 onward. And just this detachment, not really understanding what I was or who I was. And so at about 20 years old or 21, I realized that I should make this project. And I didn't make the first photograph until 2018 when I was traveling. I met this guy and he invited me to go live with him in Germany. And I accepted the invitation, and then we began traveling around Europe, and I had this newfound freedom. I didn't have any responsibilities, and I was just making photographs. And so a lot of those images that are printed that are in the show come from 2018 and that time in Europe. That one there is in Berlin, and that's where I met him also. And then last year, things took a little bit of a break. I moved back to Houston, and the show, Mike, my friend Mike and I put on a show or two exhibitions. And yeah, I didn't make any photographs that year. And then in 2020, again, I have made 2 of them. And I just made another that I got developed recently. And that was really interesting. This guy met me online and invited me on a date for Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. And I accepted. And the next day I went to his hotel room and made a portrait of him. Yeah, it was interesting.
Can you go to your screen mode and show the photos on your
Okay.
you're talking about the work, and you can maybe even like I guess talk about each one if you like.
Okay. Yeah. I'll show you the most recent, although it's not edited yet, but yeah. This is Ken. He messaged me on Silver Daddies, and we went to Papados, and he was really wanting to eat fried shrimp. And so we had a little date. It was cute. And then made this portrait. And I really enjoy this image. The coloring, especially in this blue frame, and him standing there. And really interesting experience with that guy. Yeah, these were some of the early ones. This is where the project began. So the project did begin in Belgium while Jürgen and I were traveling there. And I met this guy through Planet Romeo. And we were both talking a lot about being nudists and this idea of being out in nature in the naked body and just musing and sharing messages and whatever. He lived in Ghent, Belgium, and I was in Antwerp. And so I took a train to go see him. He met me at the station. His wife was away for the day, who knows where. And we just went over to his place, had coffee, and went into the backyard and made some pictures. And this was my favorite from the day. I probably made 10 images that day, and this was my favorite. And he has all of these scars here from a recent prostate surgery. And yeah, it's an interesting image. A friend of mine was commenting on the framing and how the framing seems to place the viewer at the table. It invites the viewer into the scene. And he's like, yeah, I don't really like that idea. I don't want to be here. And but I appreciate that comment. It's funny. This was in Leuven, Belgium, just outside of Brussels. I met this couple as they were walking in Antwerp during Pride, and immediately ran over to them to go ask if they would take a portrait. And I was very candid. I said, you might think I'm crazy, but I want to make your portrait. I want to make your nude portrait. And they stared at me, and then they looked at each other and paused and thought about it, and then they both agreed. They didn't care. And then about 2 weeks later, I took a train to go see them, and they live on a little farm. And this field is one of the neighboring fields at their farm. And we took a walk, and they stripped, and this was the result. This was an interesting story, and there are two images based on this hunting blind, is what it's called, a hunting blind. I was frustrated with Jürgen, and we were staying with his parents in this town that they live called Bad Kissingen, which is a spa town in Bavaria. And I was frustrated. I was having a day, and I just went out and went for a walk, and I went into this thing here, and for some reason I decided to strip off my clothes and masturbate inside of this thing. And so I did. And that resulted in this one also, which is called Stripped in the Hunting Blind. And yeah, it's an interesting image with a lot of energy here. So that was that. It's what comes of being sexually frustrated and masturbating in hunting blinds. This was one of the more recent images. This happened just after the new year in 2020. I met the older guy in the bottom half of the frame on Silver Daddies also. His name is Dale. And we met at Herman Park one day, had a conversation. He was very shy. And he was telling me about one of his boyfriends who lives in Kuwait, and how this man was going to be here in Houston for about 2 weeks. And so we coordinated and met up and photographed. And yeah, this was the result. The very tender image of this couple. And the boyfriend from Kuwait did not want to be identified. And that's something I've had to work around quite a bit throughout this project, is the presence of men being closeted, unable to reveal their sexuality. And as a result, many of the images are anonymous or semi-anonymous. And that became one of the aspects of the project I was not expecting, was this sense of secrecy or anonymity. But it just so happened to be. I also was not expecting to meet so many closeted men who are married to women and cannot reveal their homoerotica. And then here we have Dominic nude with jade pendant. This is a really special image for me in a lot of ways. For one, it's an image of love. It's an image of new love and of romance. We met in the street in Berlin, and speaking for myself, I fell in love with this person, and to this day am still in love with them deeply. And now he's transitioning. He's moved away from Berlin. He's on his way to China, and in that move, he is, it seems, becoming a new person. And we talked about this recently over the phone, a role exit, this concept of role exit within sociology. There's this sociologist developed an idea called role exit, in which is a 4-stage process of exiting a current identity and entering into a new identity. And this is something that's prevalent in most humans, especially in like adolescence. But in the case of adults, it happens in some very nuanced ways. This would happen in a lot of people who are coming out or who are transitioning sexes. And in his case, he's moving, he's shaved, and he is leaving the West and he's going to the East. And so this is an image of him before that transition. And so that's why it embodies this special character. It's also just a very tender, honest portrait of a man. This one is lovely just for the sake of the phenomenon of the event of a rainbow happening in the midst of a forest. And in another sense, it assumes this idea, this trope of LGBT pride. It, and I like that association. I don't mind it. I think I like that it plays on that idea, but in a very soft and romantic way. And that is something that I embody in a lot of my work, and that I hope to embody in my character and in my spirit, is this idea of being very tender and romantic and gracious. I love the idea of a protest, but of a very gentle protest. And so this, for me, represents a type of gentle protest, but it's also just a natural event. And so, yeah, love this one. This here is also a very special image for me. All of them have this sense of uh, autobiography. They all relate to my own life and my own story in many ways. And I don't think this project could exist without being autobiographical. But this here was a surgeon that I met in Antwerp, and we also met on Planet Romeo. And a couple of times after this, or maybe it was one time after this, he then paid me to massage him using one of my profiles in Planet Romeo. I had put up a profile which people could solicit sex, and he had solicited a massage. And this happened, this was I think the first time we met. And I was living with Jürgen in this apartment, a fourth floor apartment at one of those like vertical houses in Antwerp. And so this is called Fourth Floor in Antwerp. It was just an afternoon with this guy.
Hey Jay, just so
Yeah.
you know, we have about 15 minutes. So if you could just wrap up just maybe like in 5, and then maybe talk about how, what's going on right now in the world that's affecting you, and then we can open up the floor to questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just wrap up. I mean, each one of these images has endless exposition, and we could talk about it forever. But yeah, let's talk about what's going on in the world right now. And we can save that conversation for another time. Another aspect of the violence that we were talking about earlier is this the way this project relates to sexual violence is the fact that this project is packed with sexual repression and this latent homoerotic energy. And I believe sexual repression to be one of the main contributors to sexual violence within culture. And I think specifically repressed homosexuality within males to be a major part of male aggression or male violence. Of course, not all domestic violence is perpetuated by men, and it's not always physical either. But looking at male physical violence, I've just read an article in CNN about a spike in domestic violence amid the global pandemic that we're going through and this stay-at-home order. And that's a really disturbing thing happening now, because if you have to stay at home and home is not safe, if you live with a violent partner, then what the fuck are you supposed to do? And yeah, it's really disturbing. But domestic violence is, again, just another form of this sexual violence as a result of repression, either emotional or sexual repression. And I don't really know how we get over those things culturally. I hope that a project like mine can provide a type of idyllic image and idyllic beauty for men, for those who identify as men, for those who are men who have sex with men, or even men who prefer women, but this can provide some type of image of what a tender, honest, loving human looks like. And as I say, a gentle protest, my work is a type of gentle protest to this repressed male erotica and this distorted view we have of masculinity within contemporary culture. I hope that my work can contribute to alleviating that distortion and providing something honest. And so, yeah, that's really what's going on today. I mean, sexual violence is prevalent in so many cultures across the world, so it's not easy to just mention in a few minutes.
Yeah. Can you maybe talk just a little about about you being in quarantine? Is that helping you as an artist, or is that possibly like
I'm
crippling
writing a
you?
lot more. Writing a lot more.
Yeah.
I can't really make photographs of people, which sucks. I haven't been able to do that, and I foresee that not happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
In another sense, the exhibition that we have on, I've photographed it in 360 with a 360 camera, and I'm building a virtual exhibition for that show. So that's one way in which I'm working through the stay-at-home order. But I mean, it's limiting. It's certainly limiting.
Yeah.
We can't go to galleries. We can't gather in spaces to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not affecting my emotions all too much. I'm not fazed by it. It's just happening. I'm more so concerned with the injustices that are happening because of it, like the domestic violence or the fact that the US government is negligent and people are hurting because of it. But personally, I'm doing fine.
Yeah. Okay. Can we open up the floor to any questions or anything, you guys? Are there any questions that are left on, or if anyone that's on Zoom that has any questions, can you unmute them? Erica?
Yeah, Frankie's here with a question.
So I really loved how when you were first discussing your love of older men, that you brought it back to such a nominal belief that there has to be a mental issue in that sense of behavior. And for me personally, I feel, and I have a question, like, do you think that is just across the board, if there is something that is not recognized as or social normacy or social interaction, that we have to see if it's classified with something that the mental cognitive skill lacks or therefore needs study of?
I don't necessarily understand the question. Are you saying must there be a mental component to?
Do you feel like that's what hinders people possibly being more open with like their sexuality in that way, or just in open in general? Because
The psychological component.
yeah, the psychological component of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In my own example, and we can multiply this by 1,000, but in my own example, the only reason I felt uncomfortable coming out, not only coming out of the closet and being a homosexual, but coming out and saying, I like this type of person, the only reason I was hindered from doing that was because of the psychological element. Because I, as an adolescent, had observed within the already existing culture and had observed based on my own family being a religious family, I had come to the conclusion that what I liked was wrong. And of course, this is a psychological component. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Any other questions? Are there any questions on Instagram or anything? No? Well, I guess.
The people are watching. The people are curious.
Yeah,
They don't know what to say right now. They don't know what to say. Thank you for the question, Frankie. I want to mention a couple other things before we go. So I mentioned the James Neal book. I sent Eric all the links, so that should be available.
What's the book called?
It is called The Origins of Same-Sex Relations in Human Culture. Fascinating book. I haven't read, I mean, I've read maybe 10% of it, but I've been reading bits and pieces. The third part is really interesting because it goes into modern culture, the whole medieval thing going into contemporary culture, also talking about the effects of the heterosexual myth on teenagers and their psychological component. There is a psychiatrist that I've just met on Instagram, Lauren Olson, very lovely human. And he has just put out a book, this one, called Finally Out. It's a type of autobiography / research book looking into the lives of people or men who are identifying as straight, but then come out late in life, as did he, coming out when he was in his, I think in his 40s or something like that, and he was married with kids. There's another one here, Bill Hayes, Insomniac City. It's a lovely memoir. Bill Hayes fell in love with a man that was much older than himself, Oliver Sacks, and it's just a wonderful retelling. I love the style of storytelling in this book. Yeah, Lauren Olson also put out an article recently about the subject matter of variable embrace, about younger people being attracted to older people, age differences in relationships. And so he put that out on Psychology Today. That's an interesting read, and he used some of my images there. And then, yeah, the last bit, the reason I think the most important aspect of the the essay that I'm writing about the link between femicide and homophobia was an essay, it was a short 3-page essay from Suzanne Farr. And Suzanne Farr, I found out, is a writer and someone who's been working with battered women's movements since the 80s. And she wrote this essay, I forget the title, but it's basically her own conclusion that's saying, yes, homophobia is a contributing factor to female violence. She also wrote a book called Homophobia, a tool of sexism. Yeah. But all of this is, it's fascinating stuff, and it contributes to and has contributed to my own exploration on this topic. And so that's why I provide that extra detail.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else, other guys, the head guys, that we, oh, hold on. Actually, in the chat, there's information on the exhibition. I guess we can post it to the Instagram and our website and our other social media about the 9 exhibition, which is up. You can go to www.9exhibition.com and you can see the whole exhibition, including Jay's work. And
Yeah.
there's going to be a 3D tour.
360.
Yeah.
I'll have that up this week.
Okay.
Still working on it.
Cool. And then in the chat, what's the guy's name? The guy that did the exhibition.
Terry
Terry.
Supreme. Yeah, Civic TV.
Yeah, he posted that there's gonna be a virtual engagement link on the exhibition also.
Yeah, he's put together a comprehensive bit of virtual engagement.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah. Hi, Slant.
Okay. I'm gonna try and figure this out. So photography in general, I guess, is like inherently about desire in some capacity. And it's always, I guess, objectifying subjects from the viewer. And I guess you appear in your photograph sometime as the subject. And so I'm thinking about the role of the photographer versus the subject and how the desired and the desiring are mutable. Can you talk about how you define desire?
Mutable being what?
Like you being a photographer and also the subject.
Okay. Yeah. I've thought a lot about this. I didn't really want to be in the pictures. In some ways, I still don't. I'm against the idea that I need to be in them in any way. But at this point, if I did not appear in two images, then there would only be one other image with a younger person's body in a project that is about younger people being attracted to older people. I've had a very difficult time finding other young people who are open enough about their attractions to be pictured in any capacity, even anonymously, even talk to me about it has been, it just hasn't happened. And so I'm working on that approach, but in the aspect of the photographer being in the image, even from a historical art history type of perspective, I don't know. Like I said, I don't really love the idea. I think it's okay. I think it's acceptable.
I'm thinking because the work is homoerotic, is the desire always sexual? Or is it somehow inherent also because of the medium of photography or its relationship to art in general? Like, is it always lust that's we're desiring? Or is it like, and I want to know, I guess, what's being desired as whenever you are the subject and it's not the man or your relationships to the man.
Okay.
Sexuality?
What is being desired? That's an interesting question. I can't say that I decide what is desired in the image. I desired the older man, and so I wanted to picture that older man, that older body. What is desired? Yeah, interesting question.
Well, I'm thinking about also the medium of photography because it's like an element of curiosity. I think photography wouldn't exist if we didn't desire them. Photographs, right? But rather, that desire is a product of lust or a curiosity. So I'm thinking about, and also versus like your relationship to the man and you becoming a subject and also them being subjects. So like what I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, the objectification, the sexualization of the subject isn't something that I want to do necessarily, but I realize that it's also inherent of the project talking about sexuality. I don't want it to be erotica or pornographic. I still want it to remain in some sense vanilla, but I do want to breach into some more challenging aspects. As far as desire, the nudity was, for me, it was mandatory in 2018. The nudity is no longer a mandatory aspect, and this is why in one of the images there is no nudity. And I want to continue in that aspect to show this type of sexuality without a nude aspect. So continuing into 2020, I want to keep or I guess just moving forward in general, I want to focus not so much on the nude body, but also embodying something else. I've had an idea of making an image of a couple. I don't know who that couple is yet, but they would be clothed in they would be mostly clothed. So I don't want the image and the desire to always be sexual. I do like the desire to be this idyllic beauty, this idyllic sense of masculinity. I think a masculine desire could be a more general sense of this project, a desire for a tender emotional masculinity as the desire of variable embrace. Is that a fair answer?
Yes.
Slant rhyme?
I think, I guess so.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, that was an interesting question. Thank you.
Okay. Can we wrap it up, you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How can we, I guess, follow you? Do your practice.
I have a
Wrap it up.
website. My website has all the things. It has all of my published work. I have an Instagram that's more or less the most active social media.
Okay.
And my Twitter also, which I think is a little more fun than Instagram. And
Yeah.
and then
I need
YouTube.
to follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter's a lot more fun than Instagram. And then this recording I will upload to my YouTube channel, which does exist
Okay.
to some capacity. I want to start a thing. I'm still in the process of starting a thing where I'm live streaming conversations with artists.
Okay.
As in some way it's a response to COVID, but I think it might extend beyond COVID. I just like the idea of engaging in conversations with artists. So that might become a thing.
Okay.
But yeah. Did I have
Yeah, we
any?
can post.
Yeah, no, I didn't have any.
I guess send us your website info and your Twitter and your Instagram, and then we can post it to our social medias and such.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, the whole artist talking thing. I mean, we're gonna be home no matter what, so that'll be like a really interesting topic beyond after the quarantine. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again for hosting this. It's a pleasure to share. And thank you to Frankie, Terry, Slant for being the faithful few. And to all of those on Instagram Live. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
Yes. I'll email you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a
Bye.
good day.